Well, pretty much every day since he's taken over as US president, we've seen Donald Trump making headlines. And of course, India is watching closely to see how this relationship is going to unfold. There have been reports that Prime Minister Modi may be visiting Washington for a bilateral visit as early as this coming summer, perhaps in May. And just today, 27 US congressmen were in Delhi. They met the Prime Minister. It's the largest ever US congressional delegation that has come visiting. And joining us tonight is someone who knows the India-US relationship perhaps better than anyone else. Ambassador Tim Roemer is back with us, and you were visiting with this congressional delegation, Ambassador. How did it go, and why was there so much interest in coming here, this huge delegation?
So one of the most important things in the U.S.-India relationship that transcends presidents, whether it's Mr. Obama or Mr. Trump or Mr. Clinton, is the bipartisan support in our country for stronger and deeper and more strategic ties with the people of India. This goes to the Democratic Party, to the Republican Party, and it's really exemplified by the nature of this congressional delegation that's visiting India right now. 27 members of Congress here to learn more about India, to show their support for stronger and better relationships with India, to take the knowledge that they learned from here in India back to the United States and talk to Mr. Trump and talk to people in Congress about why this relationship should be broadened and deepened, why it's important for our economy, why it's important for world prosperity and security. I like to say that there are problem nations in the world and there are problem-solving nations in the world. And India is a problem solver on climate, on terrorism. They're practicing the gold standard with the United States and working together to try to prevent terrorism in the world. So I think the good news with this congressional delegation visiting here is that there's strong bipartisan support in the United States House and the United States Senate for this relationship. And as Mr. Trump gets his feet underneath him, his appointments in place, Congress is going to be advocating for moving this relationship along.
And that really puts into context why this was such an important visit. Having said that, there is a lot of concern in India about, for instance, the H-1B visa issue. And you've had a delegation from NASSCOM, which represents IT and software bodies in this country, that is actually in the US and is trying to lobby there and talk to the administration about the disadvantages of putting restrictions on those visas. It'll hurt them. How do you see that playing out? I mean, Trump is a very protectionist president. Do you think he'll have to follow through on his campaign rhetoric on these issues? And does that spell bad news for India then?
Well, look, I think when we met with Mr. Modi this morning, he was very strong, very forceful, very animated when he talked about this issue. And he talked about it in terms of America has been a world leader in democracy and democratic values. They're also a leader in inventing things and energy and knowledge. And in order for America to continue to lead the world, we must have open borders. We must bring in talent from around the world, practicing democracy and innovation at the same time.
This was the Prime Minister's message to the delegation.
This was the Prime Minister's message, and it's a compelling message. I can see him making this presentation, an argument to Mr. Trump, if he comes to the United States in the next few months, that this is good for America, that this brain talent, this investment of talent and entrepreneurship that we know in America is good for us, that people coming from India help us create jobs, help us create new opportunities and businesses, help us grow our economy. And to your precise question, what does Mr. Trump do with this when Mr. Modi makes the presentation to him and his arguments for it? Mr. Trump, like Mr. Modi, is a businessman. He wants to get to an agreement at the end of the day. He also has to keep his constituency, the blue-collar worker, on his side, his base. So maybe there's a point where the two work out a principled compromise, where Mr. Trump is compromising on the visa, immigration, H-1B visa issue, but also working to make sure that there's better trade between the United States and India and more job creation in the United States for a win-win scenario. So there might be a principled compromise deal economically that these two men can forge at the end of the day.
That's interesting. And the other, of course, big issue for India is terrorism. And here again, I think there's an expectation in India, or at least a hope, that the Trump administration would be tough on Pakistan and would really put pressure on Pakistan to act. There's a lot of unpredictability, though, about what President Trump may or may not do with Pakistan. How do you see that? I mean, is that an X factor about how the US-Pakistan relationship is going to play out?
Well, as we have our meetings in India, we're finding that there is not just a reception for Mr. Trump, but some interest in working with him on certain areas, such as terrorism, counterterrorism, such as the possibility of India, which has worked closely with the United States on new counterterrorism agreements that I helped sign in 2010, 2011, new intel sharing agreements, new ways to work together on law enforcement, border security, port security issues. But Mr. Trump is talking about going after ISIS worldwide. And India could bring some very valuable contributions to that worldwide effort through the UN, through maritime security, through other means. So I think this is an area. Mr. Trump is also very hawkish on China. That's something that India would be at least interested in the United States being more forceful on China on cyber, South China Seas, encirclement of India. China's becoming more of Pakistan's partner in many ways.
But we still really don't know what his Pakistan policy or his approach to Pakistan will be. And that is an X factor, you would agree right now.
I would say that we don't know yet exactly who he's going to appoint as ambassador, what his priorities are going to be there. He does say he's going to be tougher on terrorism with the house arrest of Hafiz Saeed. Maybe the United States will say this is a very small incremental step on house arrest. In fact, what we should be doing with Hafiz Saeed, the mastermind of 2611, somebody who was responsible for killing Indians and Americans, he needs to be brought swiftly and strongly to justice, not just simply put under house arrest. This is a person who has helped pull off some of the most dastardly terrorist deeds in the region. And as I said before, whether you're killing Pakistanis with terrorism, killing Indians, killing Americans, house arrest is not a strong enough step. And maybe Mr. Trump will work with Pakistan to take stronger steps to address this and create more stability in the world.
I think that's very significant what you're saying. But, when you talked about India helping in this fight against ISIS, one of the concerns perhaps here would be whether India would come under more pressure to send troops on the ground in Afghanistan, for example. That's something that is going to be very difficult for India to do. Is there an expectation in the new administration that India should send in troops?
I don't know what the Trump administration is thinking on this. I certainly think the U.S. policy with India, with the respect we have for their sovereign nation, for their decision making, whether to send troops in, that's completely India's decision, in my opinion. As a member of our Congress who has voted on war, voting whether or not to send our young men and women into war, that is a very, very personal and nation-specific kind of a decision, and that should be made by your people and your government, not the United States government with respect to Afghanistan. With respect to India's involvement in Afghanistan, when I served here as U.S. ambassador, we worked very closely with the Indians to get more Indian involvement on economic issues, on women empowerment issues, on security issues, not troops going there, but India's smart diplomatic, political, economic involvement as a regional peacemaker to have them help us bring peace and stability to Afghanistan in the long run, and something that the previous government committed over $2 billion to, and I think the Modi government continues to make that kind of sensible and that kind of peaceful investment in the community.
So let me ask you, what are your thoughts on the president himself and the fact that you have someone who's so unpredictable, who, as I was telling you, may have already tweeted by now because he's gotten up in the morning, probably something about fake news and how everything's a lie out there. But how are Americans looking at this sort of new style of presidency?
Well, you have it here. Mr. Modi is a new style of leader. He, like Mr. Trump, comes from the business community. He, like Mr. Trump, likes to go around the media and use new technology, whether they're holograms in a campaign or tweeting or WhatsApp directly to voters and communicate with them, circumvent the media, make sure his message is unfiltered going to them. Mr. Trump wakes up every morning and likes this kind of interaction with the people. I think it's something new and fresh. I don't agree with a lot of the philosophy that Mr. Trump
said like a good diplomat.
But I think, the more we can be in touch directly with the people and their concerns.
But I mean, calling the media the enemy of the American people, is he a little unhinged?
I don't agree with. Our media is a very important branch of our government. They are independent. We have great journalism, as you do in your very vibrant and healthy media here. That kind of independent media doing good journalism, keeping politicians honest, is crucial in our democracies. And I think Mr. Trump using that kind of language, using fake news, alternative facts, calling out the media is, selectively, if they're covering them negatively, sometimes is fake news and other times is doing great stories. I just don't think that does our great democracy any favors.
I find it fascinating, though, the way the American media calls him out on the alternative facts and calls him out regularly and is not afraid to question him. And I think that speaks very well of the democratic systems that are in place in the United States, where you can ask president a tough question and not cower down. They've been pretty tough on him.
Well, and our press has gone after presidents in the past, not because they have an angle or a political philosophy, but because they're going after the facts for the American people. Watergate was a great example of great journalism by a particular set of reporters that dug mercilessly into the facts over a several-month period, did great journalism, great discovery of illegal activity, fought the most powerful interests in Washington to get that story covered and get it out there, found that a president had broken the law, and brought him down. It wasn't a press or a newspaper that did it. It was our fourth branch of government that has a job to keep our politicians honest.
So let me ask you a rather undiplomatic question at the end.
You never do that on this.
Which is that, you think President Trump will complete his term? Or do you think he's going to get himself into trouble and face a Richard Nixon type of situation?
I don't read what the bookmakers and the Las Vegas people are saying about this. I'm an old school person. I believe that when a president gets elected in our system, that you don't spend all your time fighting against them for the whole 4 years. You look for opportunities to work together, especially on important issues like U.S.-India relations, make the world a safer and a better place. Don't ever compromise on your principles. Fight that president tooth and bone when you disagree with them to represent your constituencies. And if they do something illegal, if they do something unethical that meets the constitutional threshold of an offense that would be impeachable as a hypothetical, then you have that to deal with later on. But I think Congress does the American people a real service by looking to the Democratic Party, looking to an agenda that will
be constructive,
proactive, but connect to the American people and the pains that we're going through: joblessness, opioid crisis, difficulty transitioning from one job to another because of automation or globalization. We need a proactive, positive agenda to communicate with our voters on that. That will be one of the best ways to go against Mr. Trump. And when he's doing something that we don't agree with, we have not only a positive agenda, we have the grounds to go after him and disagree with him vociferously on those points. But let's take those as they are. He's only a month into his term. Let's especially see where we can go forward on international relations.
And perhaps the encouraging news has been, for instance, a couple of good appointments, and particularly the National Security Advisor today, perhaps a headline, as we said in our story as well, one of the better headlines that's come out from this administration. Ambassador Roemer, thank you very much for coming in. It's always great to talk to you and get some perspective on where
pleasure.
India,
Good to be
US
back in
tie
India.
ahead.
Thank you for
Thank you
greeting
very
me.
much. And that's it on our show tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time. Goodbye.